Hello viewers. Today let us see the structure of caste system. India's caste system is among the world's oldest forms of social division practiced among Hindus. This caste system divides Hindus into four main categories, that is the hierarchical groups based on their karma, reincarnation and dharma, that is their work and duty, which is existing for more than 3000 years. The four main categories are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the Shudras based on who they were in their past life, their karma and what family lineage they come from. This structure is based on the Manav Dharma Shastra, which is the authoritative traditional manuscript of the Hindu code written by Manu. According to legends, Manu is the author of Manu Smriti. He is the first teacher and legislator to prescribe norms and practices of social life to humankind. Manu Smriti encompasses pragmatic visualization as well as the idealization of life or how life should be lived. The book of Manu presents the structure of the caste system in a logical order. It deals with the law of proper conduct, which is twofold. The first deals with the ashrama dharma and the second deals with the proper conduct of every varna. As per ancient scriptures, the origin of Manu Smriti is attributed to Brahma, the creator, who passes it on to the first human, Manu, who passes it on to the first teacher, Brihu, and he passes it on to the other sages. Since its composition, Manu Smriti was seen as the foremost Dharma Shastra, overshadowing all other law books. In later texts, Manu is the title or the name of 14 Kshatriya rulers of earth, or alternatively as the head of dynasties that begin with each cyclic kalpa when the universe is born anew. The science of dharma is one of the divisions of kalpa sciences which deals with sacrifices and ceremonies. This kalpa sciences is divided into three, that is Shrauta Sutra, Griha Sutra and Dharma Sutra. Shrauta Sutra deals with the duties of the sacrificer, Griha Sutra deals with the duties of the householder and the Dharma Sutra deals with the duties of the citizen. The structure and contents of the Manu Smriti consists of 2685 verses. It covers the entire gamut of human life from social obligations and duties of the various varnas and individuals in various stages of life in Hindu philosophy. The text reveals the richness and the diversities of the social, political, economic, religious, cultural, aesthetic dimensions of life. It is the microcosm of the Hindu and Indian civilization of the time. Dharma is considered above the king and he should never intercept with dharma. As dharma is absolute, eternal and unchangeable, the king could act only according to dharma. According to Manu, dharma is something that is followed by learned people ascended to by the virtuous. It should be followed with the idea that observance will bear the fruit. Originally, the word dharma means the law, proper, rule of the right, justice, morality and religion. But the primary importance is given to duty. At the later period, the meaning of the word has been restricted to duty. He who persists in discharging his duties in the righteous manner reaches the deathless state. Vedas are the first source of dharma and next come the smritis. Then comes the virtuous conduct of those who know the Veda, customs and practice of the holy men. The king was to maintain dharma with the help of the priest. The priest taught him dharma and the king obeyed and maintained. There is an impression that Manu Dharma was created by priests for their exclusive use. It must be remembered that the term priest at that time was used in a much wider connotation. A priest was held up to be the paradigmatic human being, a complete and perfect example of humankind, a kind of ideal. So, dharma is considered divine. In fact, people believed that not only the king, but also the gods themselves maintained the life based on dharma. Let us see the principle behind the caste system. As per Manu, all the four varnas are created and proper duties relegated to each varna to prevent social dissolution. He believed that the nature of every person is originally determined, that is individual is determined by his origin. He says, but to whatever course of action the Lord at first appointed each, that is the kind of beings, that alone has spontaneously adapted in each succeeding creation. To simplify, whatever God has assigned to each at the time of the first creation, that clings spontaneously to in the succeeding births. Manu's theory is based on the theory of karma, any three gunas, and transmigration of soul. According to this theory, the karma, the action of a man in a particular birth, determines his next birth. The sins committed by a man leads him to be a beast or an animal or a low caste person during his next birth. The three gunas, qualities that are inherited in human beings are sattva, the goodness, rajas, the activity, tamas, the darkness. These three gunas constantly influx and interact with one another in a playful state referred to as maya or illusion. The pattern of the interplay of the gunas can define the essential qualities of someone or something and influence the path and progress of life. All three gunas, tamas, rajas and sattva, is always present in all being and objects surrounding us, but vary in their relative amounts. We humans have the unique ability to consciously alter the levels of the gunas. The tamas guna is a state of darkness, inactivity, materiality, laziness, disgust, attachment, depression, helplessness, doubt, guilt, shame, boredom, addiction, hurt, sadness, apathy, confusion, grief, dependency, ignorance and so on. The rajas is a state of energy, action, change and movement. The nature of rajas is of attraction, longing and attachment, and rajas strongly bind us to the fruits of our work. Other rajasic qualities are anger, euphoria, anxiety, fear, restlessness, stress, courage, rumination, determination, chaos, etc. Sattva is a state of harmony, balance, joy and intelligence. Sattva is the guna that yogis achieve towards, as it reduces rajas and tamas and thus makes liberation possible. Other sattvic qualities are delight, happiness, peace, wellness, freedom, love, compassion, friendliness, focus, self-control, satisfaction, trust, fulfillment, calmness, bliss, cheerfulness, gratitude, fearlessness, selflessness. All the matter in the universe arises from the fundamental substance called Prakriti. From Prakriti, these three gunas emerge, creating the essential aspects of all nature, energy, matter and consciousness. The awareness and manipulation of three gunas lead one towards enlightenment, increase peace and reduce stress. As mentioned earlier, it is the domination of any of these categories of gunas that determines the birth of a person, either as a Brahmin or Kshatriya or Vaishya or a Shudra. The dominating guna causes transmigration of the soul to a suitable varna. Persons who do good action set the parents who belong to upper caste, and persons who commit sins get the parents who belong to the lower caste. The Hindus of Manu era believed that the four varnas were constituted to maintain dharma in the Hindu society. But during every birth, a chance is given to every person for improvisation. Manu says, a Shudra who is pure, the servant of his master, gentle in his speech and free from pride, always seek refuge with Brahmins, attain in his next life a higher caste. Thus, a person who is born in a particular caste should do his or her duties prescribed to his caste devotedly, which alone elevates him or her to a higher status during his next birth. If anybody violates the law of dharma, he/she is doomed to be born still low during the next birth. Now, let us see the Manu system of caste. Manu Dharma Shastra has reinforced the Vedic theory of the four varnas. They are Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. According to some critics, Manu had a broader vision of life, where men all over the world naturally fall into one or the other of these four varnas, according to their inner and outer characteristics. In fact, Manu tried to create a social order out of the diverse and conflicting elements which was needed for the society of his time. He also specifies that Brahmins sprang up from the mouth of the Purusha, the primeval deity, the Kshatriyas from the arms, Vaishyas from the thighs, and the Shudra from the feet of the deity. Manu says that there are only 4 varnas. The meaning of the word varna as a comprehensive term includes several jatis. Thus, the jatis are grouped into 4 varnas according to him. Brahmana is a jati. Thus, through several jatis grouped together form one varna, and a varna may itself be a jati. The word jati is used either to cover small groups or large groups. Manu used varnas as Arya varna, Kshatriya varna, Vaishya varna, and Shudra varna. Manu neither defined the word Arya nor did the word denote the people of India. Kelkar says, for centuries till the arrival of European scholars on Indian soil, the people of India never meant by the word Arya that of invaders who reduced the native of the soil to servitude. The word indeed probably had such a meaning, but only for a brief period, antedating the concrete beginnings of civilizations of India. At the end of the composition of the Rig Veda, the descendants of the invading tribes had forgotten where they come from, and though themselves to be autochthonous and men of noble qualities and culture. The word Arya had received from sanctity and had become a little to be applied to properly qualified people than a word expressive of the recently born conception of race. Manu says that anybody who is not Milecha, Dasyavahya and Shudra is an Arya. The Arya is by Manu to denote an honorable man. Milechas are barbarians who are different from Aryans. Dasyus are Chandalas who are different from Aryans. Manu considers Vratyas as not Aryans because they did not undergo 16 ceremonies. Vahyas are not Aryans and they are ordinary people. Shudras are not Aryans. Besides the above categories, the Aryan born persons who violated the laws of Dharma are considered to be non-Aryans. Then who are called as Aryans? The Vedic Aryans and princes of Aryan origin and the princes of Dravidian origin are called as Aryans. Let us see the kinds of castes. The following are the types of castes prescribed by Manu. The 4 original varnas, castes which were supposed to be produced by the mixture with the pure and mixed castes which have lost their status due to neglect of sacred rites, castes due to the exclusion of persons from the community, slaves and their descendants, people excluded from the community of 4 varnas as well as their descendants. Manu says that there are 4 original varnas, that is Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. As said earlier, the origin of Brahmana is from the mouth of the deity, Kshatriya from the arms, Vaishya from the thighs and Shudra from the feet of the Lord. With regard to mixed castes, Manu says that there are about 60 mixed castes which can be classified as follows: castes produced from 2 different pure castes, castes produced from the mixture of pure and mixed castes, castes produced from parents of mixed origin of both sides. The earlier authors like Bodhayana, Vasishtha and Gautama have given their ideas on mixed castes. Vasishtha and Gautama regard mixed castes as produced from unequal marriages. Vasishtha has given the number of such mixed castes as 10, while Gautama gives 2 different numbers, 1 and 10 and another as 12. Bodhayana has given 3 categories of mixed castes as stated above. He enumerates mixed castes produced from the mixture of pure castes. He named 2 low castes as born of parents, one of whom was pure. Shudra and the other were mixed. He gives 2 castes where both parents were of mixed origin. Manu carried the principles of the above author further by enumerating the mixed castes as 30. Manu speaks about Vratyas and their descendants. Vratyas are twice born castes marrying girls of equal castes. Since they neglected their sacred rites, they have fallen from their status. There are more than a dozen castes who are descendants of Vratyas: Brahmin or Vratya, Kshatriyas or Vratyas. He gives a list of Kshatriya tribes who have fallen to the status of Shudra due to the neglect of sacred rites and disobedience of Brahmins. The following are the examples: Paundrakas, the Pots; the Udras, the people of Odisha; Kamraja, the Kabulis; Yavanas, Bactrian Greeks; Shakas, Scythians; Chinas, Chinese; Vibrates, Kirantis; Daradas, Dats, frontier tribe; Kasas. Kelkar says Manu simply records phenomena which he observed in his days. The castes which adopted purer conduct and performed austerities raised their status in the eyes of the world, while the castes neglecting those elevating ceremonies and austerities fell. The writer never meant that these various tribes and nationalities like the Chinese and the Greeks were pieces fallen from one standard caste. He was aware of the fact that there are various tribes in the world who rule and ought to be called Kshatriyas. He only explained why these alike and ruling tribes are not considered as equals by the standard of Kshatriya of Kuru and Kosala. He never attempted to derive the entirety of the humankind from the Indian population. The Hindus of Manu era believed that the population of the world was divided into various jatis, and every one of these jati belonged to one or the other of the four varnas, as it is an inevitable occupational division of humankind in any society, that is the priestly group, the warrior group, trader group, and last the working group. Although similar occupational groups are found in among the people and tribes all over the world, they could not think that the system was peculiar to Indian society. The foreigners who wanted to convert to Hinduism were accommodated and given the name of the jati according to their occupation. The foreigners who did not subscribe to Hindu views on caste were called as Milechas. Once they got formal entry as Hindus, the caste name was given to them. But when he did not follow the prescribed rites, he lost his status of his caste. For example, the Yavanas and Kairates could not be called as Kshatriyas, fighting tribes, since they did not perform the sacred rites prescribed of Kshatriyas. Let us see the constitution of four varnas. Manu gives a detailed account of the constitution of the varna, the constitution of Brahmin varna. Manu says that Brahmana sprang up from the mouth of the Purusha. Therefore, the Brahmin is said to be at the top of the ladder of the caste system. The prescribed traditional occupation for this Brahmana varna are studying, teaching, receiving gifts, bestowing gifts. Though these were the four occupations prescribed to this caste, they were allowed to adopt any other occupation during the time of distress. But Manu criticized certain occupations adopted by the Brahmins which degrade their status. He condemns the following occupations adopted by the Brahmins: teaching for money, selling of soma and flavors, bards, selling oil, keeping a gambling house, selling meat, informers, messengers, architects, planters of trees, paid servants of village, butchers, cattlemen, actors, singers, makers of bow and arrow, trainers of elephants, oxen, horses, camels, etc., astrologers, bird fanciers, farmers. The Brahmins were not entirely democratic body themselves. A Brahmin who married a Shudra woman as the first wife was hated by the fellow caste members. The sons who were born of these parents were looked down. Manu says that if the children of this combination were to be graded to this varna, the father should have married a virgin. The Golaks have thus become Brahmins by adopting this standard. There were some pretenders also who claimed themselves as Brahmins, but Manu denied their claim. His classification of Brahmins by locality, like Panchagauda and Panchadravida, does not appear to have arisen. Manu says that son of Brahman by a Kshatriya woman should be classified as Brahmana. Kelkar says that the decision of admitting a person into Brahmin varna rested with individuals or with small groups. Some might admit a person who had committed mistakes and some might not follow suit. Evidently, this proved that the Brahmin were not organized into a regular corporation. As said earlier, the caste is a said unit which is endogamous in nature. Therefore, Marriage outside the Varna were discouraged. Even the princes were reluctant to give their daughters to the Brahmins, who were accepted as superior than themselves unless the Brahmins were healthy. When such marriages took place, some Brahmins accepted them and some did not. Let us see the constitution of the Kshatriya Varna. The term Kshatriya is applied to persons who were dominant. Those who were dominant were accepted as Kshatriyas. This was applied irrespective of the race or color. Thus, the royal families of tribal kingdoms were accepted as Kshatriyas. In accordance with the explanation given above, even among the tribes which were dominant over other tribes were given the status of Kshatriya. Kshatriyas had no organized body. The Kshatriyas had no cleavage between themselves and the masses of the Brahmin did. In short, whoever becomes dominant was known as Kshatriya. For example, success to the throne never depended on the particular Kshatriya family. Whoever competed and won the throne becomes a Kshatriya. The winner not only raised his status as Kshatriya, but also raised the status of the members of family and the tribes. Kshatriyas were warriors and rulers. There are some misconceptions regarding Kshatriya. The misconceptions are that all the royal families were labeled as Kshatriyas. It led to the wrong identification of Kshatriya and Rajputs. The Rajputs were inferior to Marathas, so the proper function of Kshatriya was to fight as warrior and rule as a king. Let us see the constitution of Vaishya Varna. Manu prescribed certain codes for Vaishyas. The Vaishyas were traders. The following occupations were prescribed: tending cattle, trading, lending money, and cultivating lands. Manu says that once a Vaishya decides to tend the cattle, other caste people are not allowed to tend the cattle. Manu insists on the Vaishya to have the knowledge of the following: value of precious stones, metal and other commodities, different countries, profit and loss, scale of wages, languages, storing and purchase of all things pertaining to his trade. Manu prohibits the following occupations for the Vaishya Varna: carpenter, shoemaker, barber, goldsmith, coppersmith, weaver, oil presser. Manu says that the prohibited occupations were menial services that belonged to the Shudra Varna. Let us see the constitution of the Shudra Varna. Manu carefully avoids making any statement as to whether a Shudra was an Arya or not. But in many places he has stated that Shudra was not an Arya. The Brahmins of Manu's era included several castes and tribes in the Shudra Varna. It was by no means a caste or a group of castes consisting of people of the same states. The Brahmins labeled the low castes of their own origin and the ruling tribes which neglected the sacred rites as Shudras. The line of demarcation between a Shudra and rest was rather one of the sacraments than of any other thing. The Shudra Varna was engaged in household services. The slaves, the hunters and the basket weavers were also considered Shudras. They were advised to adopt these occupations: the carpenter, shoemaker, barber, goldsmith, blacksmith, weaver, oil presser. The most advisable profession for a Shudra to be a domestic servant in the house of a Brahmin, which would elevate him. The Shudras were not allowed to accumulate wealth. Manu says that the accumulation of wealth by Shudra would make him arrogant and disrespectful. Thus, he would forget his duty of being humble, thereby losing all his merit, which would prevent his ultimate elevation, that is spiritual merit. He says no collection of wealth may be made by a Shudra, even though he may be able to do it. For a Shudra who has acquired wealth gives pain to Brahmin. In general, those who received the right of samskara were Arya tribes, and those who did not receive it were base born. The main difference between Vaishya and Shudra was the former was Dvaja, twice born, while the later was not. The above is the constitution of 4 Varnas in Hindu society. The Brahmins, being at the top of the social ladder, were constituted not only as Avarna but also a caste. The second in the ladder was Kshatriya, who were not the united caste. This collective name was given to the families and tribes who were dominant at that time. Third in the ladder was Vaishyas, who were not also organized as a caste. This collective name was given to the traders of a particular type at that time. The collective name of Shudra was given to persons who were engaged in household duties, unskilled labor, and such other occupations regarded as low during the era of Manu. They were not formed as a caste. Ketkat says, today in India, a number of castes are called Shudras by the Brahmins, but these castes are by no means on the same level. Among Shudras themselves, the various castes are rated at high, low, or intermediate. The lower castes try to adopt manners, achara of the higher caste, and thus they would raise their heads above others and disown any sort of connection with their former brothers. There is a mention of pretenders to a higher caste more than once and commented the limitation of higher caste very highly. Again, it seems improbable that the tribes which followed occupation that are characteristics of low civilization, the races which may have been once dominant, the people engaged in more or less skilled occupation, and people differing from each other in cleanliness, civilization, and prestige would fraternize freely. Simply behave, they all have received sacraments. We may or may not find references to such phenomenon in the literature of the period, but a society with doctrines of purity and pollution so meticulously developed and so highly specialized as it is today could hardly be imagined without a process so closely allied with the doctrines. Occupational caste. Let us see the occupational caste. An occupational caste can be defined either as a caste whose members regard a particular occupation as their peculiar one, or an aggregate of people who have become associated with a particular occupation. The occupational castes have not been developed from guilds. The list of occupational castes I will just mention. Sairandri, adoring and attending the master. Maitreyake, ringing the bell during the time of dawn and praising great men. Margava Ardesa, the boatman. Karavara, leather worker. Pandusopka, cane dealer. Antyavasai, burial ground. Sudas, management of horses and chariots. Ambastyas, art of healing. Vaidekas, service of women. Magadas, trade. Nishadas, fish killing. Ayogava, carpenters. Medas, Andaras, slaughter of all animals. Kshatris, Ugars and Pukasas, catching and killing of animals. Digvanas, leather workers. Vanas, beating the drums. Thus, Manu shows various jobs engaged by various occupations. It is not possible to change from one caste to another. There is no caste conversion. Manu pigeonholes various occupational varnas under the umbrella called Shudras. The caste system that emerged gradually in Indian society is a result of a long social evolution extending over centuries. Manu wanted to incorporate the sometimes conflicting rights of various groups of people within the framework of Varnashrama. He tried to create a pluralistic society by group offering special hereditary occupation and cultural freedom to the caste. Manu also mentions various tribes and prescribes the occupations they could take up. He even included the foreign tribes and those living in the border regions like Kambojas, Yavanas, Shukas, Pallavas, Kairates into the category of Shudra, and they were regarded as twice born. Manu gives a great deal of importance to customs which he considered essential for the maintenance of social life. These customs were based on the religious principles or Dharmasutra and were binding on all individuals. Social organization formed the basis of polity, and he gives it due attention. The Code of Manu also talks about established practices that encompassed observance of caste, domestic rituals, funeral rites, and obligation to men and to God, and religious and philosophical discussions on the subject of secular laws. Manu always emphasized a way of life in accordance with the philosophy and spirit of the Vedas, and he interpreted it in his own fashion. He emphasizes on aspects of life, and his discourses are all part of the cultural tradition of the subcontinent. A comprehensive study of the ancient laws anywhere in the world will make it clear that no distinction was made by society between faith, beliefs, rituals, customs, morality, or ethics on the one hand, and the different clauses and provisions of the so called positive laws on the other. For Manu, the whole of the Vedas was a source of dharma or law. The Manusmriti is a depiction of our complex cosmic system, extended in a conceptual structure that encompasses the universe as a whole. In the process, the text reflects the thoughts and ideas of ancient India. Thank you.